This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Welcome in another edition of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Murray. As a reminder, please hit that 5-star rating. Continue the reviews, 3 episodes each and every week into your feed. And also, you now get to see this lovely mug on YouTube. We used to just do it on Thursdays. Now we do it every single day. Our guy Wyatt working hard, and you can check it out. YouTube.com/college football betting podcast. Hit that subscribe button, and we're continuing to put out videos and some shorts as well. So if you want to see us 3 times a week, not only hear us, but also check us out on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button as we continue to try to build things up over there on YouTube. Tomorrow, of course, we'll check in with Matt Humans. We'll have our breakdown of the Week 4 card, but it is Wednesday, so that means Wednesdays with Wes. Wes Reynolds will run through his favorite plays, of course, get an in-depth preview of his beloved Indiana Hoosiers taking on Illinois. Not the game of the week, according to Fox or ESPN, but in Wes's eyes, and I would agree, the game of the week. So looking forward to that conversation. And then our new addition to Wednesdays with Wes is also Wednesdays with Brett Ciancia. Pick 6 previews. Pick 6 Plus is out. Great data into your inbox every Tuesday. And we'll talk to Brett. A look back a little bit at the week that was and a look ahead to some of the biggest games of the upcoming week. I did want to pass this across. So we're recording this on Wednesday morning. And Pete Thamel sent out a tweet regarding the status of Lenora Sellers. Of course, Lenora Sellers leaving last week's 31-7 win by Vanderbilt due to a head injury. And this is the tweet from Pete Thamel early on Wednesday morning. There's optimism around the status of South Carolina quarterback Lenora Sellers for the game at Missouri on Saturday. He's been in practice, and there are positive signs for his availability. Shane Beamer has pointed to the SEC availability report that comes out tonight for any update on Sellers. And because of that, we've seen a pretty significant movement in the betting market. You know, this number has gone kind of all over the place. The look-ahead number was Missouri -3. It got up to 13.5 because of the injury to Lenora Sellers and the likelihood or believed likelihood that he would be out. And now if Sellers is back in, the number right now sits at 10. So we'll deep dive that game a little bit more tomorrow. Missouri certainly has been impressive to start the year, and a team that Matt Humans very high on has a win total over on that Missouri Tigers team. I wanted to talk a little win totals with you guys because here we are, we're 3 weeks in. Some teams have overachieved, some teams have underachieved, and we've seen adjustments in the betting markets for win totals. And this isn't a bet for me, but I wanted to point it out because a gentleman who joined the podcast, a very good college football handicapper, Kyle Hunter, threw it out on social media yesterday that Maryland under 5.5 wins was a bet that he liked in the adjusted win total market. Now, you look at Maryland, they're off to a 3-0 start. They beat the teams they're supposed to beat, but the remaining schedule, how many games are you going to be a favorite in? So when I saw that tweet, it kind of got the gears going saying, hey, man, maybe I need to go over there and check out all these adjusted win totals. And I wanted to talk about 2. And one of them is the best bet. One of them is just a discussion point. And that would be Notre Dame. And yes, go ahead, drink at home. I'm talking Notre Dame. But their preseason win total at some shops was 10.5. And I saw that, no surprise here, sportsbooks were probably pretty happy that Notre Dame has already dropped 2 games and the under has already cashed on 10.5 wins. Most of the markets was 10. And I said earlier this year on the Independent podcast with my guys, Matt Fortuna and Pete Sampson, I thought this was an 11-1 football team, more likely 10-2 than 12-0. And right now, I do not think they are an 11-win football team because that would be impossible in the regular season. So I threw out the question on Twitter, and you could always follow me on Twitter at @1TimMurray. With Notre Dame's remaining schedule, would you go over or under 8.5 wins? So will they win all but one of their remaining games? They are 0-2. Here's the remaining schedule for Notre Dame. Home to Purdue, at Arkansas, home to Boise State, home to NC State, home to USC, bye week at Boston College, Navy, at Pitt, Syracuse, Stanford. This defense, as we discussed on Tuesday's podcast, has massive issues. And Chris Ash was a poor hire, and we will see. If you want to look glass half full, and this is a bad example because my glass is empty, of water right now, maybe that is indicative of how I feel about this Notre Dame team. If you wanted to look glass half full, you could say they won't face a better team than Miami all year, and I think that's fair. And they won't face a better offensive line than Miami and Texas A&M. Also, I think fair. However, with that defense and being as leaky as it has been so far, and what we've seen from the Arkansas offense, I certainly think Arkansas with Bobby Petrino and Taylon Green, they're going to be able to get some points in a hostile environment. It's going to be a striped game, I think. Look, people in Fayetteville have been talking about that game since the summer. And even though Notre Dame's 0-2, and God forbid they better be 1-2 going into that game, that's going to be a juiced up atmosphere for an 11 a.m. local kick time. So that one won't be easy. And then you've got the USC game. I actually like the situation for Notre Dame against USC, the travel spot. Notre Dame historically has fared well at home against the Trojans. And you've got the added wrinkle of the uncertainty of the status of the rivalry. And Marcus Freeman tends to get his team up for these games. But you look at the rest of the schedule, are there potential landmines? Does the Pitt game look less daunting after what we saw from them against West Virginia? The NC State game, is that a tricky sandwich spot after you play Boise State and Arkansas? Then you've got USC waiting in the wings. I certainly think NC State is going to be kind of annoying, kind of like going to the dentist, but I think there's a reason this is juiced over at -140 at DraftKings, +115 to the under. Shout out to Matt Grissom. Always love connecting with our guy, Matt Grissom, who is a diehard Arkansas fan. He thinks Arkansas and USC beat the Irish. I would say this. I think Notre Dame probably goes 1-1 against Arkansas and USC, and I would be more inclined to look at Arkansas pulling off the upset there in Fayetteville than USC at home. But Notre Dame's got to figure out this defense, and we'll see. But I thought offensively there were some positives there from Notre Dame to pull from that game. But, you know, as you look at a lot of these teams, like a Clemson, we saw Dabo Swinney, cutting promos yesterday. If you think you can do better than us, better than me, I'll move on and I'll go somewhere else. So I do think Dabo and Clemson are kind of fascinating this week when you have Syracuse coming in to Clemson. It's been an underwhelming season when you think of the season opening loss to LSU, the 16-0 deficit to Troy, losing the way that they did at Georgia Tech. I think this could be the buy low spot. And when I think of what I saw yesterday from his press conference, and I think back to the Tyler from Spartanburg, totally real phone call, right, to Dabo's call-in show that no longer exists. They came out and they played exceptionally well following that. They beat Notre Dame as a home underdog back a couple years ago. I do wonder if this is a spot to look at Clemson in a buy low opportunity, -17. But on the flip side, you have to wonder, what's the mindset of the Clemson Tiger program, knowing that they've got 2 losses? Is the season lost? This is a team that had preseason national championship aspirations, and now here they are sitting with a 1-2 record. So, yeah, those are a couple things to keep an eye on. By the way, if you're wondering, for Clemson and their adjusted win total, it is, believe it or not, sitting at 7.5. Now, heavily juiced to the over, but 7.5 for the Clemson Tigers. But before we get to Wes Reynolds, I wanted to give you a bet that I did place on an adjusted win total, and that's UCLA. And as crazy as it sounds, this was a team that I think the preseason win total was 4.5, 5. The adjusted win total right now is 1.5. UCLA adjusted win total is 1.5. And oh, by the way, they just fired not only DeShaun Foster, their head coach, they also fired their defensive coordinator, as it has been an absolute nightmare. Now, do you wonder, does UCLA bounce back? Do they look a bit better off the fired coach bump? They go on the road to Northwestern next week. It's certainly possible, But let's run through the schedule real quickly for UCLA. And this is a team that just got outgained by New Mexico, 450 to 326. A New Mexico football program that has covered their 2 games as big underdogs, has 72 new players, and ran for 298 yards last week at the Rose Bowl against this putrid defense. This is a UCLA team that in week 1 against Utah got outscored 43 to 10 and got outgained in that game 492 to 220, and Utah ran for 286 yards. So the adjusted win total is 1.5 plus 135 to the under. And if you look at their schedule, let's ask the question, will UCLA be a favorite in any game from here on out? At Northwestern, underdog. Home to Penn State, massive underdog. At Michigan State, underdog. Home to Maryland, I would still think maybe an underdog. We'll see what the Terps look like over the next couple of weeks, but that's going to be a big game. Okay, call it a pick'em. At Indiana, underdog. Home to Nebraska, underdog. At Ohio State, do we even need to mention? Home to Washington, underdog. At USC, underdog. Now, could this team rally behind interim coaches? Sure, I guess. But also you have to remember this. The portal is now open. These players have played 3 games. I don't know what their NIL situations are. I don't know what Nico is thinking, their quarterback. And maybe you could argue, hey, if they go to a backup, maybe it'd be better. Listening to that schedule, looking at that schedule, are there 2 wins there? And you think about Northwestern and you think about Maryland. Okay, those would be the 2 obvious games. I think Northwestern, a program that is trying to build with David Braun, that's a team that's going to circle UCLA as a must-get game there for the Purple Cats. Northwestern, to start this year, you lose at Tulane, you beat an FCS foe. Last week, you battle back, you get a backdoor cover. You've got a bye week, and you've got UCLA. That is a must-have spot for Northwestern and the Purple Cats. They haven't quit on the season yet. So while UCLA, could be feisty, I guess, against Northwestern, I just think at plus 135, for me, it was worth the bet in saying that UCLA's got to prove it to me that they can win 2 games. And here's the thing. All right, let's say they beat Northwestern. Well, we have the Maryland game at home that you could potentially get off of this bet. If they lose to Northwestern next week, I think we're sitting pretty at the under 1.5. And once again, if they pop a win, then you kind of have to pick your spot of where maybe they could look at a possibility of getting a win. But I'm curious to see what happens with this UCLA team. Man, they just, looking at those 2 games they lose to Mountain West foes, they were outclassed by New Mexico. I know they showed a little fight late in the UCLA game, but I am hard-pressed to see if this team is going to win 2 games. And if we get under 1.5 wins at plus 135, knowing they're going to be an underdog in probably every game here on out, give me the under on UCLA. So a little adjusted win total. I do think adjusted win totals, certainly something to just take a gander at after what we've seen. And has the market moved a little bit too much? Do you think, once again, just using it as an example, not a bet for me, but has the market moved too much on Notre Dame after maybe they played their 2 toughest foes and they'll turn things around, they'll right this ship? Or you could get plus money on the under if you believe Notre Dame does have some massive problems and they ultimately end up 8-4 or worse. So check those out over at DraftKings, adjusted win totals. And shout out to Kyle Hunter. He kind of got me jump-started on looking at some of those adjusted win totals, and I took a little shot on UCLA under 1.5 plus 135. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will chat with Wes Reynolds. But before we do that, I do want to give you a little word of advice regarding our good friends over at Rainbow Authentics. And as you can see, if you're watching with us on YouTube, I am walking my Rainbow Authentics hat. Big weekend this weekend for the Rainbow Warriors as Micah Alejado is expected back. And our friends over at Rainbow Authentics are a official sponsor of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. They are your official source for game-used apparel, autographs, and trading cards from your favorite Hawaii student athletes. Every item tells a story, whether it's a game-worn jersey, a signed ball, or a lovely hat like the one I am wearing right now. Beyond memorabilia, Rainbow Authentics is committed to supporting the community. Their mission is rooted in empowering student athletes and coaches, strengthening local programs, and giving back to Hawaii with pride. With exclusive custom gear, Rainbow Authentics also makes sure you look your very best every game day. Check it out, rainbowauthentics.com. Mahalo to our good friends over at Rainbow Authentics, a proud sponsor of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. All right, quick break. When we come back, Wednesdays with Wes Reynolds will join us right here on the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. And as promised, it is Wednesday. So Wednesdays with Wes continue. Wes Reynolds, our great handicapper over at VSiN. Read all his work at vsin.com. The Long Shots podcast. I'm sure he'll be putting in all the work for the Ryder Cup next week. But Wes, we got a big one this week. Your boys against Illinois, primetime NBC. I think College Game Day should have gone there, but regardless, Illinois, Indiana, Bloomington. What do you make of this one? How big is this game for the Hoosiers and this football program?
Yeah, NBC, and if you're watching in New York on Channel 4 WNBC, Saturday night, Indiana, Illinois. Yeah, I think it's the game of the week. And I think game day, all the shows should have gone there. And it's because it's a prove-it game for both teams. Much is being made of Illinois because they were the team that got the buzz all summer, right? Now they're number 9 in the country. They're this year's Indiana, is what they've been saying about Illinois, and off to a 3-0 start. Nice win at Duke a couple weeks ago in their first kind of moderate test of the season. Meanwhile, Indiana hasn't really had a test all season, and that's why I think a lot of people don't necessarily like Indiana, because the non-conference schedule has been very nondescript, and they haven't really played anybody. Indiana hadn't played anybody, so I think the sentiment out there, like just the general, and I don't want to say necessarily public sentiment, I'm saying in the media and just kind of the once over when you look at this game, is that Indiana hadn't played anybody. So I think a lot of the sentiment maybe is geared toward the Illinois side, but the market is not really saying that. Mm-hmm. Like, you would have thought that this line would have been much smaller. You're seeing this just went to 6, actually, as we're talking here, at a notable faraway place. We'll refer to it as that. And, it's 5.5 at a lot of places. There's still some 4.5. So it's kind of like dancing around that dead zone here. And I think that the number's going to drop, because I do think you're going to get some bets on Illinois. And I do think the general public is going to come in on Illinois, because certainly, it's like Indiana beat Indiana State, Old Dominion, and Kennesaw State. So they're thinking, okay, maybe Indiana was that one-hit wonder, right? I think the Hoosiers win the game. I have not bet it yet, because I want to lay as low as I possibly can with Indiana, and potentially a cheapish money line. Anything under $2 would be where I would want to come in. I think it's also going to be a low-scoring game, and you're seeing 52.5 out there. Both these teams, I think, are going to try to want to establish the run. I think on both sides, and even Indiana with Lee Beebe, the UAB transfer, being out, they've got depth at running back. We know that's what Illinois wants to do, is they want to run the ball. This is old school, Brett Bielema, Big Ten football. I think Kurt Cignetti's also willing to play that game. So you're going to have a very competitive one down there at Memorial Stadium on Saturday night for the Red Out. And I think it's one of those games where it's going to have pace early, Tim, and then it's going to be competitive, and it's going to die a little bit in the fourth quarter, where it's like, okay, we've got to control the ball, and we've got to just move the chains and run the ball. So I think that you see the scoring slow way down as you get later in the game.
Yeah, this number, as you mentioned, 52.5. The look-ahead line was around 5, I think, over the summer, 3.5. So it's kind of hung out in that area. And it's worth noting, as you well know, Indiana has really thrived in this favorite role so far this year, 2-1 ATS. Since the, I guess, looks a little bit better, the clunky game against Old Dominion after they went down and curb stomped Virginia Tech, West. But 2-0 ATS since then as the favorite. And right now, Kirk Cignetti, 11-3 ATS since taking over as the head coach of Indiana as a favorite this year in that favorite role. What have you made so far? Because you mentioned it, no offense to Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and the Sycamores of Indiana State. They have not been really on my radar. What have you made of Fernando Mendoza and his play at the quarterback position so far this year for Indiana?
I think he's been solid. Game one against Old Dominion, probably a little bit slow to get out of the gate, but I think he's been very solid. And it's tough to really give him a thorough evaluation because he has not played, I think, a really good team as of yet. But he's pretty athletic. He can run a little bit. He hasn't had to really run necessarily because the Hoosiers been able to run the ball against the lower competition. But I think he's been very solid. He's got a good group of receivers. Not only Elijah Surratt is the possession guy. Omar Cooper had 4 touchdowns last time out against Indiana State, so he did the Al Bundy. But they have, I think, a really diverse receiving crew and good tight ends and a lot of different weapons. So, this is the game that's going to show why you went out and got him as your quarterback, because I think from a talent standpoint, people would rank him ahead of Curtis Rourke, who, oh, by the way, got drafted into the National Football League by the San Francisco 49ers, so he wasn't too bad. So I think Mendoza's been solid. I think the concern, if there's any for Indiana, is maybe depth at a couple positions, especially like on the defensive line and a little bit on the offensive line. I think the starters are fine, but if you get injuries, that's a cause for concern for this team.
It's going to be a fun one, no doubt. Indiana and Illinois, and as much as I would have loved Illinois to lose the Duke from a betting standpoint, I do like the fact that both these teams are undefeated. There's a little extra juice, 9 versus 19, and Indiana laying 5.5 here, and we'll see if that market comes in a little bit on Illinois as the week goes on. Total 52.5 for you right now, Wes. I saw it put into the picks page. As of right now, only play you have on this game would be a little bit on the under 52.5.
Yeah, that's the way I'm definitely going to stick to. I want to play Indiana here, and I do think that they're the right side and they're going to win the game. I want to see this number drop. I kind of don't like it in this dead zone. I thought, Tim, that they, like I was saying earlier, that they would be a much smaller favorite. I thought this would be 2.5 or 3 because I don't know if they're going to get a lot of respect maybe from the general media. There's still pollsters, including our buddy and mutual friend Brett McMurphy, who hasn't ranked the Hoosiers yet. It's like, man, these are fighting words now. I just want to needle. I want to win because I want to needle McMurphy and be like, rank us, rank him, Brett McMurphy, America's college football insider. But yeah, I'm on the under here. 4th straight home game for Indiana. They're not looking ahead, even though they have Iowa and Oregon on deck on the road. I think both these teams are going to be laser focused on this game.
Yeah, this is. I agree. I think this is the game of the week. Even though I would say Auburn and Oklahoma, a lot of intrigue there in that particular game. I think it's a really good week. I know next week everyone's excited for, as they should be, but I think this week's going to be really good. And last week was stellar as well. I mean, depending on what side you were on, Notre Dame, Texas A&M. But I digress. We don't need to go into that right now. Let's stick in the Big Ten. And we've seen a big movement on this game, and I believe this is the first game of the triple header on NBC. Maryland, Wisconsin will lead into Notre Dame, Purdue, and then the nightcap, Illinois, Indiana. This number's been on the move, and I know you got a better number, but this thing opened around 7. It's out to 10.5. The Badgers coming off of a whooping at the hands of Alabama. This is a must-have spot for Wisconsin. I have under 5.5, but I was kind of anticipating this to be a win for the Badgers. We don't know who will be at quarterback. It sounds like Billy Edwards could be back, but Danny O'Neill's going to take a number of reps there. Why did you ultimately lay the chalk here with Wisconsin, and is 10 too high for you at this point?
Not at this point. I still think it's layable, maybe a little bit less. We certainly always want to get the best of it if we can. But you mentioned it with Billy Edwards, if he is going to go. Of course, the former Maryland quarterback. Yep. He was the starting quarterback for the Terps last year. Now they have a kid that's got some talent, Malik Washington, who's from the area. But this is the first road start for the Terps. For him, a true freshman, by the way, is Malik Washington. So a little bit of concern here. I think Wisconsin, when I looked at him, Tim, and I agree with you on the under. I thought that they were going to be a better team this year, but it wasn't going to show in the win-loss record because of the schedule. It's an absolute nightmare. And look, they got it put to them by Alabama last week, 38-14. So that was not really a shocker. You also have Maryland or Michigan on the road in 2 weeks. But I think Wisconsin, to me, they're kind of getting back to their identity, right? Because they tried to be that square peg in a round hole, I think, with Phil Longo as the offensive coordinator, where they're doing all this air raid stuff. It's like Wisconsin is built to run the football and run it frequently and have those big offensive linemen. And this all started back in the Barry Alvarez era, where they're going to run the ball and they're going to play good defense and play kind of your classic Big Ten football, if you will. And I think that they're getting back to that identity. I still don't think they have all the pieces in place to do that because they tried to recruit to new systems, essentially, when Longo was there as offensive coordinator. Now they have the former OC at Kansas who wants to do, I think, a little bit more zone read. Now, I think he wants to do that more with Edwards than he certainly does Danny O'Neal, even though O'Neal's capable of running that offense. I think this is a little bit buy low on the Badgers, who were, even though they made it more cosmetically pleasing at the end, they got beat. They got beat handily by Alabama. So I think Wisconsin lays out Maryland.
Yeah, this is, as you mentioned, a big spot. We had Ben Stevens, our new colleague, on Primetime the other night, and he talked about how much Mike Locksley, the head coach of Maryland, has struggled in conference play. I just looked it up. As an underdog since 2019 when he took over, just 14-21 against the spread, 8-27 straight up. So these have not been spots where Mike Locksley and the Terps have thrived. And this is, a must-get spot, certainly, for Luke Fickell, who he's going to start to feel the heat, especially when you look at the rest of the schedule. They have to win this game. So, this is a kind of a must-have sort of spot. You mentioned a freshman making his first road start, and you and I are on the same side here. The numbers move, which makes us feel good, but unfortunately, if people haven't been tuned in earlier in the weeks to VSiN or looking on vsin.com for picks, maybe the numbers moved a little bit too much. But I want to go 7:30 Eastern, East Carolina, BYU, Wes, because this was a BYU team when you heard the news that Jake Retzlaff was going to be leaving, or however you want to determine, getting kicked off the team, et cetera, suspended. I took a little position on under 7.5 at some plus money, but it wasn't something that I could give out because that number moves so quickly. And we don't really know what BYU is yet, right? They played Portland State and then they played Stanford. East Carolina has looked the part so far. And, for those who don't know, that's going to be a raucous environment on Saturday night. Weird travel spot, right, from Provo to Greenville, North Carolina as well. I think you and I are on the same wavelength here. East Carolina, now 6.5. Both you and I got 7.5, but this could be a tricky spot for Bear Bachmeier to make his first career road start.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is, Tim, and this has gone under the 7 to 6.5. I still think it's probably worth a little bit of a play, though, on the Pirates. I know BYU is off that bye, but didn't really get tested early on this year. Has BYU last played Stanford. Stanford really couldn't move the ball, even though Stanford did pull off a nice upset over BC and kind of a bad travel spot for the Eagles. I like Caton Hauser. Caton Hauser's been around. I think a lot of the listeners and viewers of the pod here will remember him at Michigan State. So good-sized kid. Very impressive win over Coastal Carolina. Shut him out last week, 38-0. They had that tough loss at NC State where they could have had it and they could have pulled the upset. Just didn't get it. But I think BYU, they're going to get in a little bit of trouble here. I worry that they can't make the plays in the passing game that they're going to need to. I think that they can run the ball, but BYU has had some issues in terms of some protection. He got sacked 3 times against Stanford. So struggling a little bit against the blitz. I think East Carolina, they're going to send some blitzes against him, try to confuse him. Tough travel. East Carolina and Greenville, you don't usually get a big name program like a BYU, being right now that East Carolina is in the American. So you don't get those type of programs in there very often. And I think that they're going to be very excited to have BYU there. It's going to be a big crowd on Saturday night. So I've been a little bit down on BYU and thought that they were a little bit overrated. And clearly the market agrees.
Yeah, so hopefully I might take a little money line here. You sprinkle on whether it's a round robin or just a late night sprinkle. But I think East Carolina is going to be feisty here in this spot, and I imagine Sup Dogs is going to be popping all the way into kickoff for this one down there in Greenville. How about this travel spot? We've got UNLV going to Miami of Ohio, and this is one of those games. I like to be transparent with our listeners here. I was staring at the board on Sunday, Wes, and I said, man, 3.5, kind of like Miami of Ohio. Didn't bet it, and then the market came in on Monday and whacked the 3.5s down to 2.5, so I did not get the best of the number. Maybe we get a little buyback. Personally, I live in Vegas, you live in Vegas. Maybe we get a shop like Stations, which is a local shop. Maybe we get the public money to hit it up to 3. So I'm going to wait and be a little patient here. But boy, this is a very weird spot, and I thought Adam Burke made a really good point. When you're looking at the board and you see a movement on a UNLV Miami game, and I'm talking about Miami of Ohio, not Miami, Florida, that's not your recreational bettor on a Monday whacking that game. So UNLV Miami of Ohio, this line is, I would say, a little stinky, right? UNLV 3-0, Miami winless, and Chuck Martin's squad only catching 2.5 here in Oxford.
Yeah, and on the UNLV side, Tim, of course, they're 3-0 with Dan Mullen here in Vegas. It's like, okay, now people are starting to talk a little bit about UNLV football. Good start. We're continuing the momentum despite the fact that Barry Odom and staff left for Purdue in the offseason. And they just beat UCLA. And we know that UCLA, this is not the vintage UCLA. Of course, DeShaun Foster fired over the weekend after losing at home as over 2 touchdown favorites to New Mexico. So maybe that win's not that impressive, but the name of it is still UCLA. So you get a team and you're beating now, I want to say Pac-12, now a Big Ten school in UCLA. So all of a sudden, maybe UNLV's feeling themselves a little bit. Now they have a bye week. They've been hearing, hey, great start, guys, and all that. Now you go on the road to Miami, who's 0-2. Miami and Chuck Martin, by the way, lost a lot of personnel from last year's team. They've been really at the top of the MAC, I think, for the last several years. Daquan Finn, who people are familiar in the MAC with him from his time at Toledo, is the quarterback for the Red Hawks. And not really that impressive so far. No touchdown passes in the first 2 games and 3 interceptions. Miami, tough schedule, though, to start out the season. You play 2 Big Ten teams on the road. They played at Wisconsin, got shut out, got blown out. Rutgers really pulled away in the second half. So this is one of those drop-in class type of games, I think, for Miami. To go down from playing the 2 Big Ten teams to getting a Mountain West team in an awkward travel spot, I like the Red Hawks here to get on the board. And I think Miami, by the way, despite giving up 45 at Rutgers, I think this defense is still pretty solid.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was talking with Adam. He previewed the MAC for our recent college football betting guide, and he made a great point about all the personnel that they lost. I did their bowl game down in Tucson, the Snoop Dogg Bowl. They lost a bunch off of that roster. But yeah, this does seem like a spot. You muck up the waters, Chuck Martin and company, and make this thing ugly, and we'll see. But yeah, I have not gotten in on this game yet, but it was definitely on my radar to take Miami as an ugly dog. Speaking of ugly dogs, we love to talk situational spots, Wes, and I want to run through some of them with you here. But one that obviously jumps out is the Vanderbilt spot. As when you look at what Diego Pavia has done as a favorite, it's been very, very impressive. As an underdog, I beg your pardon, as he is, I believe, now up to 10-2 ATS as an underdog at Vanderbilt. You go back to his time at New Mexico State, his last year, I want to say, was it like 15, 4-1 or something outrageous like that. But in these roles as the favorite, they've kind of gone through the motions. Now, you do have the revenge factor kind of lurking there with this Georgia State squad, but is this your classic letdown spot for Vandy now as a 27.5 point favorite against Georgia State on Saturday?
It very well could be, Tim, even though Vanderbilt has Utah State next week.
Yep.
So it's not as good of a spot when you don't have an SEC opponent coming in. And Vanderbilt, 2 straight wins on the road, win at Virginia Tech and the win at South Carolina as Lenora Sellers got knocked out of the game, and Vanderbilt really pulled away, I think, in the second half and put that game well out of reach. But you look, they won the 2 road games, and now they get ranked. And sometimes when you have a team that's just outside that top 25, if you ever look in your newspaper, whatever website, wherever you look to look at the rankings, and you see the others receiving votes, those others receiving votes teams have an urgency because they want to get ranked. That's a big deal to them. And I think that's a big deal for Vanderbilt to be ranked 20th. But when that happens and you finally get that achievement, man, that's a tough go now, because now you got expectations, and the expectations have certainly changed for Vanderbilt. This is not a Georgia State team I love. I did back them against Ole Miss and did not get rewarded, as they got absolutely drilled by the Rebels in the second half, and then got beat at home pretty easily by Memphis. Finally got on the board last week, did Georgia State with a win over an FCS opponent, Murray State. So it's not that I love this team. It's more of a fade of Vanderbilt just in the short term. This is dancing around, though. 27 and a half, I think, is the high. Might even be a couple 26 and a halves out there. I think Georgia State, even with the revenge angle, somehow, just hangs in here. I think Vanderbilt might not be very sharp early.
Yeah, I'm debating. I'll probably end up on Georgia State. Maybe we end up getting a 28. We'll see what the market does. Utah State has been feistier than anticipated. And that one with Alabama on deck could be maybe an intriguing one, but certainly coming off of the big win. I wanted to run through a couple of the other spots with you before we hit on another bet that you've logged here, Wes. You and I think a lot of us, and I got to Saturday and I said, man, this Temple thing is getting too cute. And ultimately the market came back in on came back in on Oklahoma. And to be honest, we never really had a shot. You and I think similarly. Sometimes as painful as it was, you got to jump back on that horse. Man, this is a massive letdown spot for Georgia Tech this week after a enormous victory last weekend. What a perfect execution to finish the game with the fire drill 55-yard field goal. I was looking it up last night, Wes, and Brent Key, who has been so great as an underdog, as a favorite, not as profitable. He took over in the 2022 season. Believe it or not, Georgia Tech was favored in 2 of those games. They lost both of them outright. They are 2-0 ATS this year as a favorite, but overall, Brent Key just 6-8-1 ATS as a favorite. So nothing too crazy, but it does feel like your classic letdown spot. Casey Keeler maybe a little bit embarrassed after that performance. I took 24 with Temple. It's 23.5 right now. Is this game on your radar at all after Temple laid an egg for us? They did not hoot their way to a cover last week against Oklahoma.
Yeah, so we have to resist the temptation, Tim, and I think that's something that we often deal with as bettors. When a team burns you, a lot of people, no, go away from them. And I think this might be a time where you got to stick with them one more week. Now, if they lose again, then they're dead to you. The third time, you're not going to get a third strike here. But, yeah, it is on my radar, and I'd be interested even a little bit at 23.5. Georgia Tech, by the way, they have Wake Forest on the road next week. That is the road ACC opener. And look, the ACC, we know it's the wheel of the ACC, and it spins around. And, who really wants to win this conference? It looks like Miami right now, by the way. The U looks like the clear best team in the ACC. So it may not be as equal as it usually is, but still, Georgia Tech 1-0. You beat Clemson, win a conference game early, and you also get ranked. Same situation as Vanderbilt. Georgia Tech now 18th in the polls. I think that this is a tough spot for the Yellow Jackets, and we've seen them can be a little sloppy. Haynes King, the dude's a warrior, no question about it, and he's tougher than a $2 steak. But sometimes, he can get, maybe a little careless with the ball, and or the passing or the accuracy isn't there. He actually does not have a touchdown pass, by the way, this season because he's been such a good runner. 156 against Colorado, 103 against Clemson. But yeah, this looked a little too rich for my blood if you want to lay the Yellow Jackets here.
Yeah, and I'll point this out too. When you've got a quarterback like Haynes King, and we saw it earlier this year against Gardner-Webb, a game they won and covered, and Aaron Philo is a very good backup quarterback to have there on your roster. But if you're Brent Key here, you can't run Haynes King. Very, very little, right? You cannot afford him to get banged up, and you've got a golden road ahead of you to get to the ACC championship. All right, couple more situational spots I want to hit with you, and then we'll hit one final bet that you've got logged on vsin.com. West Virginia, what a crazy finish. Look, I didn't give it out because I thought West Virginia was going to be a good side, and then all the injuries piled up, and I said, you know what, I'm going to stay off of it here. And they come from 10 down, they force overtime, they get the win. I mean, you had Rich Rodriguez literally crying on the sideline after the game, as this game was so massive for him to win it against Pitt, a game that obviously we all remember, 2007, the backyard brawl. West Virginia's chance to go to a national title was upended by a bad Pitt team. They're a big underdog this weekend. Market's starting to come in on Kansas here. Is this a letdown spot? Even though it's a conference game, Wes, you go out there, you're missing your running back, one of your top wide receivers. Could Kansas put it on the Mountaineers here in this spot?
I think that they can, and I think the market thinks that they are, by the way. Mostly 14s now.
Yeah.
This was 11.5, 12 on the opener, and mostly 14. If you could find a rogue 13.5, I don't think that's the worst play in the world to necessarily lay it with Kansas. And Kansas has now had a week to kind of stew over blowing that game to Mizzou, which is a game that they looked like they had well in hand. And then not only lose the game in the fourth quarter, but also don't cover. So one of the more painful early beats, I think, of the college football season. I eventually did get on game day. I took 7.5 with West Virginia just on the number because I wasn't convinced with Pittsburgh. And West Virginia, look, they found a way that, like, they turned the ball over a lot. They had a lot of bad penalties, but so did Pittsburgh. It was a little bit of a dirt fest between the two teams. Like, okay, who's the last team that's going to make a mistake? And that's the team that's going to lose. And it was Pittsburgh in overtime on Saturday. So, yeah, I think if this crosses, 14, you're going to see some numbers bettors, just arbit and try to take West Virginia at plus 14.5. But I think the market has it right here with the Jayhawks.
All right, we'll wrap on this. I saw you throw this into the picks page. It's funny. You lose the way that UNC lost week one, and you kind of just out of sight, out of mind right now with this UNC team. So they dispatched of FCS Richmond last week. They beat Charlotte 2 weeks ago. UNC now goes to the bounce house to take on Scott Frost and UCF. The number has gone from 3.5 out to 7 at some spots in favor of UCF. We've seen a little bit of under money come in, and I think that was the pick I saw you throw into the picks page. So what about the total jumps out to you here in UNC UCF?
Yeah, on the UCF side, I think Scott Frost is finally starting the right quarterback, and Taven Jackson, the Indiana transfer. He didn't win the job in camp, and then he's the one that had to rescue them in the first game against Jacksonville State on that Thursday night, the opening night of the college football season. And they barely got by the Gamecocks, who was a way down team. Speaking of Rich Rod and his staff obviously gone, so they're having to rebuild. One thing about Carolina, I know we didn't see it in the second half, and I think a lot of it, too, was because the offense really couldn't stay on the field. And I think the offense does have some problems for North Carolina. I just don't think there's the talent there. I don't know if Gio Lopez is really the guy to get it done long term. I don't think he's necessarily a good enough quarterback for that program to win a lot of games necessarily this year. But they did beat Richmond 41-6. I think Bill Belichick, he's obviously defense first, and he's always been a defensive guy. So you would expect they're at least going to be decent on one side of the ball, and that's where I think Carolina is decent defensively. So I know it's risky because UCF historically is a high-scoring team, but, that was under Gus Malzahn, and different offense with Frost, different operation right now. So, yeah, I thought that I liked the low here. I took under 49. I'd still play a little under 48 as well. A defensive battle between kind of a crossroads game right now because Carolina, despite that loss to TCU, they're still 2-1. All of a sudden you get this one down in the bounce house, you're 3-1. It's like, hey, we got a chance to go to a bowl game, have a solid season. Same with UCF, even though these are non-conference games for both of these teams. This is a little bit of a directional game. Like one team may go sideways and then one team may be able to go upwards based on who wins this one.
All right, I got a tweet this past week, Wes, about your appearance. They love you on Wednesdays with Wes, but they wanted a recap. So let's run through the recap right here, and you tell me whether or not at the current numbers you still would roll with it. So we've got Georgia State catching 27.5, still good at that number?
Yes.
UNC Central Florida under 48, 47.5, still okay?
Yeah, still good. Maybe a marginal play because these totals have so much variance in college football.
Wisconsin, Maryland, now we're looking at 10. Is that too rich for your blood?
10 is probably the most I would go.
BYU, ECU, we've gone through the key of 7. Both you and I have 7.5. 6.5, you get a little murky. Do we wait for maybe a little buyback? What are we doing here?
You could, and look, I am one. I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me, and you don't want to do this necessarily all the time. I wouldn't mind +7 minus $1.20 here.
Okay.
I think you don't want to get too sensitive about that. Now, some people will say I'm, committing sacrilege by buying half points. You want to do it on the key numbers too. You don't want to just do it in general willy-nilly, but this would be one I might look at, especially with a lower total of 49.
And then speaking of key numbers, UNLV, Miami, Ohio, right now 2.5. You got 3.5. I'm waiting for the 3. Maybe we get it here in Vegas if we get public support. At 2.5, still worth it, or would you wait to see if a 3 shows?
I'd wait, but if you have to, I would take the 2.5. I think Miami wins this outright. I think this is just UNLV walking to a really weird spot in Oxford on Saturday, and this is still a new team. This is a lot different personnel than what Barry Odom had. So maybe getting a little bit ahead of their skis here are the Rebels, or at least maybe some of the fans based on the expectations for this team right now.
And then lastly, the big one, IU, Illinois, total 52.5. That's still out there, so I imagine still a play for you on the under in that one.
Yeah, and on the money line, I think wait for some Illinois to come in, and then anything under $2, where if you get a sizable move on Illinois, this may get down to like -180. I think lay the money line on the Hoosiers.
Wes, always appreciate it. Looking forward to all your content, especially with the Ryder Cup next week, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday right here on the podcast.
You bet, Tim. Thanks for having me.
There he is. Wednesdays with Wes Reynolds at Wes Reynolds 1. Take a quick break. Brett Ciancia, Pick 6 Previews, joins us next right here on the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. And as promised, as we do every Wednesday, we welcome in from Pick 6 Previews and now Pick 6 Plus, Brett Ciancia. Follow him on Twitter at Pick 6 Previews. Brett, we've now got 3 weeks of full data, week 0 a little bit too, but we're starting to kind of get into it and know what these teams are all about. You've got Pick 6 Plus out there. We're going to dive into these games, but as you look back a bit to week number 3, what were some of the surprising results and adjustments that ultimately you had in your numbers?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Tim. Exciting college football Saturday again. It seemed like every slate of the day was packed with some action, but you start out at noon. Georgia Tech Clemson was a big one. I think now you have a new ACC title picture there at the top. Of course, coming in, Clemson was the heavy favorite to win the league. They were the defending champs. Now you got to downgrade them. I mean, their offense is out of sorts, and they allowed Haynes King to really dominate that game. 25 carries for King from the quarterback spot. So, and you look at Georgia Tech's schedule going forward, it's very manageable. I think they're going to be favored the rest of the way as it stands right now in league play. So I think that was the big takeaway, was a shift in the ACC title picture. As the day progressed, you get to LSU, Florida. You see DJ Lagway throw 5 picks. LSU's defense gets after it again, but maybe leaves some questions with the offensive side of the ball. Punting the ball 7 times in that game. The rushing offense was a little bit stagnant. So not sure what to make of them. I think they held serve, but I think the league is still wide open in the SEC. But a lot of angles to get to. I mean, we have Notre Dame A&M to talk about. We got the big Georgia-Tennessee shootout. So excited to break it down with you.
Yeah, no doubt. And if you have the Pick 6 Plus like I do, you look over your game grader top 25, Ohio State, Penn State, Texas still there at 3. I'm curious what your numbers have shown on Texas. It's been obviously very underwhelming. Some boo birds coming out for Arch Manning's performance against UTEP, I should say. So what have your numbers shown on Texas? Are you not ready to kind of overreact yet? Is there cause for concern when it comes to the Longhorns?
Well, this is an example where the numbers might not match what the eye is watching because if you watch Arch Manning, he's really struggling in the passing game. 10 straight incompletions at one point, and these are just, he's missing wide open guys. He's trying to go with the arm angles, and it's just not working. So I'm concerned with their offense big time, especially when you look at their running back spot. They have some injuries they're dealing with. Trey Wisner is out, and I think their backup, C.J. Baxter, left the game after his first carry. So look at that as a potential injury spot there for Texas. Of course, they have another non-AQ matchup here, Sam Houston this week before the big Red River game. But so issues at running back. The passing game has not clicked at all. Now, Arch does bring some with his legs, but I don't think that's going to be enough to get them through an SEC gauntlet. So that's an example where maybe the power ratings are slower to downgrade a team than what we're watching on our screens every week. But they're trending in the wrong direction for sure.
You know, a team that has a massive one this week, College Game Day will be there. Miami gets Florida, and I loved Miami last week. I thought it was a really tricky spot for South Florida, and boy, 3 weeks in, you kind of throw the Bethune-Cookman game out, but still, they beat Notre Dame. Does that result look a little less impressive? I don't know. I still think it was an impressive result to open up the season with that win, and I thought they were more dominant in that game than the Irish, maybe a little bit more than the score showed, and then just absolutely destroyed South Florida. That was your number 2 best game grade of the week. How much have you upgraded this Miami team so far?
Yeah, well, I agree with Miami. Impressive so far. Back in the preview magazine, I had them as a playoff team. I had them as an at-large. So right around that top 10 threshold there coming into the year. So already a high starting point. They impressed against Notre Dame, and I'm not downgrading that win at all. Now that Notre Dame lost a second game, I think Notre Dame's still a solid team, and like you said, they flashed pretty well in that one. I'm impressed all around with Miami. Now, their issue last year was on defense, and they packed that secondary with 4-star transfers. I think they brought 5 of them in, and then their defensive line has finally taken a step. You got Ruben Bain playing like an All-American. And then their 5-star defensive tackle, Justin Scott, is stepping up. He forced a fumble against Notre Dame. So a lot to like from them on defense now. Looks like a complete team. Carson Beck leading the offense. Great receiver stable. They can go 5 deep at receiver. And the running backs look special. So I like Miami a lot. They're now projected as my ACC champion. I think they're going to be favored the rest of the way in their remaining 9 games. Of course, Florida and Florida State are tests, but I think Miami's the pick in the ACC right now. They look the part.
Yeah, it's hard not to agree with that. And, it's funny. We were joking on the podcast earlier this week, Brett, and saying, who's the team that we trust? And, we kind of both hesitated, both Adam and I, and said, is it Miami? Can we trust Mario Cristobal? It's a scary proposition because, of past history there. Last week, Brett, you and I talked about, and maybe it was a little bit wishful thinking, knowing both of our beliefs in Alabama heading into this year, and we really haven't seen much of Florida State since that week 1 win. They played an FCS foe, and they get Kent State this week, but Alabama goes out and really puts on a strong performance. And one of the things that I love about the preview magazine is looking at some of the game grades you give, and seeing a 105 was pretty eye-popping there for Wisconsin. So what did you take away from that Alabama victory against Wisconsin? And now, is this a Bama team that maybe, as you and I discussed last week, maybe we shouldn't, throw the dirt on their grave just yet?
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to overreact to the week 1 loss. Of course, some of that you can't unsee on defense, the lack of pursuit, lack of physicality, but maybe they're going to get that fixed once we get going here. It was one game, and they looked apart Saturday. They dominated Wisconsin thoroughly, all sides of the ball. plus 250 in yardage. Ty Simpson looks solid at quarterback now. He followed up that poor debut, going perfect in week 2. I think he was 17 for 17 passing. They got their next 2 quarterbacks involved too, with Keelan Russell and Austin Mack. They both threw 2 touchdowns apiece. And then, yeah, against Wisconsin, same deal. They were they were a full team, both sides of the ball. And then you got Ryan Williams back. He's put up 2 touchdowns. One was a long catch and run. The other one, he did one of his Ryan Williams spin moves on the sideline. It was, he's a playmaker. So now that you have him at 100%, I think Alabama, they're right back in the playoff hunt. I think it was too quick. Some people wrote them off. Me and you were wise there. We said, hold your cards. Let's see more from Alabama, and I think they're bouncing back. Now, huge one coming up next week, and not this Saturday, the next one, between the hedges, looking to snap the longest win streak at home for Georgia. So we'll talk about that one next week, but so far so good for Alabama.
Yeah, lastly, from a look back standpoint, before we jump into the games this week, Brett, is that Georgia-Tennessee game, and fireworks all over the place. I was very fortunate to cash a Georgia money line ticket because Tennessee had many of opportunities and missed a field goal late in that one. Curious what you did with both of those teams, because for Georgia, I was very impressed. I mean, the touchdown pass to Humphreys was unbelievable late in that game. They were able to run the football. The defense was a little leaky, which made me a bit concerned. But overall, Brett, what did you take away from Georgia, Tennessee, and what adjustments did you make?
I was blown away by both offenses, and those were questions for me coming into 2025, especially Tennessee. And this was before the Nico drama. I had questions all over the place. They were replacing 4 offensive linemen, the whole trio of receivers, the all-SEC running back, Dylan Sampson. So I was worrying about the offense, and they clicked. I mean, this was reminded me of the Alabama game a couple years back when Jalen Hyatt went off on all those long touchdowns. That was Chris Brazzell this week. He had 2 that went over 65 yards, cashed in a third one from about 10 yards out. But, that offense, they look like one of the best in the country all of a sudden. And with Georgia, we were wondering when their offense would wake up, and they only had 28 points against Austin Peay last week. They struggled. I think it was a 1st and 1 at the 1st and goal. They couldn't punch it in against an FCS team. But now, wow, I mean, they flipped on the switch too. Gunnar Stockton, not only with his legs, which he had shown the first couple games, but now with his arm. I mean, you touched on that touchdown pass was unbelievable. So, I think you upgrade them both. It's weird in a loss for Tennessee to upgrade them, but I leave that game feeling better about both teams. And I think they're both going to be factors in this wide open SEC. So
all right, let's get to this. Yeah, let's get to this week here. And, one of the great storylines, last week, maybe a little under the radar, you had Darian Mensah return to Tulane, and his former team gets the best of him. Now we've got the return of Jackson Arnold to Oklahoma. And look, Oklahoma seems very content, as they should, with John Mateer. He's been tremendous so far for this Sooners team. And we know this is a massive game. The look-ahead line was around 4.5. It's now up to 6.5. Who knows if we get to a 7? Probably not, but you never know. Some public money, I would imagine, comes in on Oklahoma. Auburn, I thought, was very impressive in their week 1 win, Brett, over Auburn. And then they've kind of played, gone through the motions. Ball State, maybe one of the worst FBS teams in college football. Clear letdown spot or look-ahead spot with South Alabama. What are you anticipating in Auburn, Oklahoma? What are some of the things that jump out to you in your numbers?
Yeah, well, like you said, it's Jackson Arnold's return to Norman, Oklahoma. I was just on the radio this morning out in Norman with KREF, and they're pumped up for this matchup, little revenge tour. But no, I think it's going to be strength on strength when Auburn has the ball. Their offensive line against Oklahoma's defensive line. I think Oklahoma's defensive line could be the best in the country. At least interior defensive line could be the best. They go 4 deep at defensive tackle. They are without their star, Mason Thomas, for the first half because of a targeting. But I think that they're deep enough at that position. It's going to be strength on strength. Here's the thing. It's kind of a two-way answer. My numbers say Oklahoma by 8, so I like them covering that touchdown. But there's something about Auburn I think we haven't seen yet. They haven't needed to tap into the pass game, and that's a kind of a compliment because their rush game has been so strong. You watch that Baylor game; they just ran it every play. A lot of it was Jackson Arnold right up the gut. He can lower the shoulder as a quarterback, but their running game has been unstopped. So I don't even think they've had to throw the ball, and he has a great receiver core around him. He's got Coleman, Eric Singleton was the number 1 transfer receiver, and then a couple other 5-stars too. So I don't know. Maybe the numbers aren't factoring in the potential that they have in the pass game. They haven't needed it yet. So I'm really interested to see this one. A great matchup there in the trenches. But I'll go Oklahoma at home. But I'm not sure about this Auburn passing attack yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, too, right now, middle of September, you've seen some teams be tested. I mean, obviously, Oklahoma and Auburn have had a big test. Auburn beating Baylor on the road, Oklahoma beating Michigan. But there are a bunch of teams that you kind of shrug your shoulders and say, all right, what are they? And I think that leads us into this game in Salt Lake City. I was very high on Utah coming into the year, loved the addition of Devin Dampier behind an elite offensive line, and we've seen it so far. However, that UCLA dominant performance, what do we make of it now that New Mexico goes into the Rose Bowl, Brett, and absolutely obliterates UCLA and they fire their coach? Texas Tech, what have we seen from the Red Raiders? We know there's, a lot of talent on the roster, but, so far when you look at who they've played, it's Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kent State, and then Oregon State last week. So a fascinating game, massive one in that conference. I hate the fact that it's at 10 a.m. local time, but nothing I could do about it. What do you make of this one, Utah and Texas Tech? The market has actually come in on Texas Tech a little bit this week. Number sitting around 3, 2.5 out there at FanDuel. Curious what you look at for Texas Tech and Utah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the game I'm most excited for. It's that wide open Big 12 we talked about all summer, all offseason, and these are two teams in the thick of it, along with Baylor, Arizona State later in the day. But this one, these are the two most impressive so far. They've been two of my biggest upgrades in the power ratings there with my game grader. You see Utah and Texas Tech both projected to make the Big 12 title game now. So this could be a preview or go a long way in that Big 12 title race. You're right. It's their first big test for both of them. Texas Tech, they've done what they're supposed to do. They've covered some massive lines, 57 points against Arkansas Pine Bluff. They covered that one easily. I think another 48-pointer against Kent State. And then last week, 24-point spread over Oregon State. That was 45-0 before they started pulling starters. So they've done everything they can. Another strength versus strength here is Utah's offensive line was rated number 1 in the country by some metrics. I had him number 1 in the Big 12 at least, going up against this Texas Tech front who brought in 3 great transfers from the portal with Romello Height and Lee Hunter and David Bailey from Stanford. All 3 made my all-transfer team. So that's just going to be must-watch television right there. 2 elite quarterbacks, too, with Dampier, more of the scrambler, with Baron Morton, the gunslinger from Texas Tech. Yeah, I think he's still number 1 in the Big 12 in quarterback rating. So I can't wait to watch this one. The last angle is with Utah. They have a couple two-way players, and this might be new to some national viewers, but they have 2 guys that are starters on defense, Lander Barton and Smith Stoden. They're taking some snaps on offense, kind of like a Travis Hunter situation. So a long-winded answer to say, I think I'm going to go Texas Tech here. It's scary to go against Utah at home. They're so good there. 91st straight sellout at Rice Eccles, and they're loud and passionate there. But I think I'm going to go with Texas Tech. Their talent level, more potential at receiver. So I'm going to go Texas Tech here to win it.
All right, let's go to a Big Ten game, and this game also in the middle of the afternoon. Nebraska and Michigan. We've got the third year rule, with Matt Rule, and so far so good for the Cornhuskers. They weren't all that impressive week 1 against Cincinnati, but found a way to win, and since then it's been kind of going through the motions for the next 2 games. And then last week we see Michigan absolutely curb stomp Central Michigan with Sharon Moore sidelined, or out, I should say, with that suspension. So Biff Poggi will be on the sidelines again there for Michigan. This number's ticked up a little bit in the favor of the Wolverines. It's around 2.5, so a pretty big coin toss game. I have over 7.5 wins on Nebraska. This game was one of those games where if I got it, great. Wasn't really banking on it in order to get there. But what have you made of Nebraska so far this year? Are they an upgrade, downgrade, or kind of status quo from where you had them heading into the season?
Yeah, with Nebraska, it remains to be seen. I can't take much away from their last 2 games. They destroyed Akron 68-0, and then they beat up on Houston Christian from the FCS ranks last week. And now, granted, if you look back 5 years ago with Nebraska, they might have been in a 1-score game with some of these teams, and who knows what would have happened with Scott Frost. So at least they did what they're supposed to do. I'll give them that. But that opening game, I didn't leave that very confident against Cincinnati. It was really a coin flip game. Cincinnati was throwing into the end zone late in that game to take actually, it would have been to take the lead.
Yep.
So I don't know. It remains to be seen. This is an example where I disagree with my numbers. Numbers have it as Nebraska as the favorite, which I was shocked to see it come out. I think that maybe you're overweighting a little bit of these FCS and the Akron game. I mean, on paper, those look incredible. But then with Michigan, they're the more proven product on defense. They have an elite front seven. And I think they're going to get after this Nebraska offense. So a couple areas I'm concerned for Nebraska. Can they block that Michigan pass rush, that front four, that front seven? It remains to be seen. I'm gonna see it when I believe it from Nebraska's offensive line. We hear every year that that their pipeline is gonna be fixed. They call it. I just haven't seen it yet against a legitimate foe yet. So I trust Michigan more. And with Bryce Underwood too, he's got a couple starts under his belt. I know at Michigan he was very rattled. But last week they got more design runs for him. He put up 120 rushing yards. That's the most from a Michigan quarterback in a decade. So I think that strains the Nebraska defense a little more. So like I said, I'm going against my numbers here. I think I trust Michigan more in this spot. With Matt Rule in Nebraska, you got to prove it first. And this is an opportunity to do it. But until then, I'm going to go Michigan.
Staying in the Big Ten, we just got done talking to Wes Reynolds, our resident Indiana alum, and he's excited for this game. He's not racing the lay, 5.5 with the Hoosiers, but the Indiana, as we've learned in the Cignetti era, they're going to play a bunch of tomato cans to start the year, which they did, and they're going to dominate them, which they did. I guess the Old Dominion game maybe looks a little bit better after ODU goes into Virginia Tech and embarrasses Virginia Tech, but I'm very intrigued by this game because, Brett, you and a handful of other folks at VSiN preseason felt like this Illinois team was overrated. Very well still could be overrated. I think the 9th ranking is a bit high there for Illinois. So I'm curious what you've done with Illinois and Indiana so far this year and what you've seen from this game, as this one will be a primetime game there in Bloomington.
Yeah, how about that? We have Indiana, Illinois as a ranked matchup in September. That's just unbelievable. I think I saw it was Illinois' highest September rank since 1964, coming in at number 9. And, they deserve some credit for last year. Like I've said on the shows is, they won 10 games. Brett Bielema, great coaching job last year to grind out 10 wins. That was a lot of close games, though. You look back, they beat Purdue by 1. That was the worst team in America. Overtime against Nebraska, 6-pointer against Kansas, Rutgers on the final play. So you never want to call a win a fluke, but they were not statistically dominant last year. Indiana was. They took care of business almost every week, blowouts every week, and they brought back 3 All-Americans on defense themselves. So in the magazine, I had Indiana in the top 20. I had Illinois outside the top 30. I had them down at 35th in the preview magazine. And to your question on how I've changed those so far in September, I'd say unchanged. I think Indiana's done what they're supposed to against the weaker opponents. Illinois, they did beat Duke, but you go watch that game. A lot of it was based off turnovers. And again, you credit them for forcing them. That was a point of emphasis that Brett Bielema put in there, Duke's ball security. So, credit them for getting it done, but not as dominant as that score would suggest. So I'm going to go Indiana here at home. A pair of perfect quarterbacks, too. You got Mendoza and Altmaier. They're both perfect in terms of touchdown to pick ratio. I think 8-0 and 9-0, respectively. So great quarterback play. I'm going to go Indiana here at home to cover the spread, to win it. I think they're the more trusted team right now.
All right, well, let's go back to the Big 12 because if you talk about good quarterback play, we've got a really fun one. Baylor, Arizona State, night game down there in Waco. And if you looked at the look-ahead line and where we're at now, really nothing has changed in this game. It's 2.5 between Baylor and Arizona State. Look, I had Baylor 2 weeks ago against SMU and felt very, very fortunate to get that cover as they won that game coming from behind. Sawyer Robertson has been amazing. He's masked a lot of wrongs for that Baylor defense. And you and I both loved Mississippi State against Arizona State as the fighting cowbells were able to pull that one out from almost squandering it. So I don't know what to do with this one. 2.5. It's kind of just hanging out there. My lean probably would be with the Sun Devils here against Baylor, but curious what your numbers came out because I know you've said it. A lot of your numbers have these Big 12 teams kind of all clumped up in a very close region.
Oh, yeah. All these games are a field goal spread. It's unbelievable. I mean, And it turns out that way too. I think last year they had the most one-score decisions of any league, and it makes for must-watch football. I love it. Those stadiums are packed. Those fans love it. You don't see that in some of the ACC stadiums on the East Coast, so that's cool to see. This one, yeah, I mean, I've watched every Arizona State game, and they just don't look like the team I thought I was signing up for. They don't look like the Big 12 champions from last year. The passing offense is broken. Sam Leavitt down there, just 5 touchdowns, 3 picks. Second worst in terms of quarterback rating in the Big 12 so far. I don't like what I've seen from them. Their defense looks okay. I think their pass rush is solid again. But that offense, the passing game, just isn't there so far. Meanwhile, with Baylor, it's kind of the opposite problem. Baylor's defense has given up a ton of points, a ton of yards. They couldn't stop Auburn's rushing attack, could barely stop SMU's passing attack. But I do love Sawyer Robertson at quarterback, a couple 400-yard games so far, arguably the best running back in the conference there with Bryson Washington. They got some freaks at receiver too. Michael Trigg at tight end, big frame. So I'm going to go Baylor here at home. You get home field advantage in kind of a toss-up game. I'm going to go Baylor. I trust their quarterback play more so far.
All right, Brett, before we wrap up, once again, Pick Six Plus, make sure you check it out at pick6previews.com. And it's a great tool to have. You get it emailed into your inbox every Tuesday. As you dove through the data through the first 3 weeks, was there a nugget or two that kind of jumped out to you based off of what we've seen so far unfolding in college football?
Wow, that's a lot to cover. I think well, there's one interesting detail. The ACC league schedule is so unbalanced that you have teams like Georgia Tech and Cal are projected as favorites in a lot of games going forward. Cal especially just came onto my radar last week because they're sitting there. They're 3-0. Well, they were 2-0. Then I'm watching that game at 1 a.m. Last Saturday night against Minnesota. I'm thinking, wait a minute, they're going to be 3-0, 3 straight double-digit wins. And then I pull up Pick 6 Plus and I see they're projected as the favorites in a lot of games, because they dodge Clemson, they dodge Miami, they dodge Florida State, they dodge Georgia Tech. I mean, the top 4, they miss them all in the ACC, and that's not their fault. It's just the way that schedule came out. So with your guy JKS at quarterback, all of a sudden you look at Cal as a team that might win 10 games, and in this playoff era, that gets them into the discussion. So I'm not calling for it yet. I'm just saying get that on your radar. Look at a Cal team that's going to be in the shadows with a really easy schedule. Coming down the pipe here.
Yeah, and that's one thing we talked about it to open the podcast. Look at some of those adjusted win totals. They're out there at DraftKings. Cal right now over under 7.5 minus 140 to the over. We talked about Georgia Tech yesterday on the podcast and their pathway to the conference championship game. So these adjusted win totals, as you pointed out, Brett, certainly could be some things to attack. I took a bet earlier today on an adjusted win total. So, sometimes we want to be nailing all our preseason predictions, but a couple of weeks in, you look at the schedule, how it's playing out, and certainly there are opportunities to look at from an adjusted win total standpoint. Brett, always appreciate it, sir. Remind the folks where you can get Pick 6 Plus.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tim. Pick6previews.com/plus. You'll see it on there. We have a sample up there. All the stats and information you'd like week to week on all 68 Power 4 teams, situational splits, against the spread trends, talent composition ratings, all that kind of stuff is on there, or Twitter at Pick6Previews.
He is Brett Ciancia. Thanks to him. Thanks to Wes Reynolds. Thanks to Wyatt, our producer. I'm Tim Murray. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. And as you can see, Brett's beautiful background there in the lovely Keystone State. We're now up on YouTube, youtube.com/College Football Betting Podcast. So for our guests, I'm Tim Murray. We're back tomorrow with the Week 4 breakdown with Matt Newmans right here on the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast.